Close your eyes and imagine the world that surrounds you, but it's not the world you know today. Instead of streets, houses, and familiar nature, an endless jungle opens up in front of you, where every breath burns in your lungs due to the heavy, saturated air. Giant winged creatures with transparent wings soar in the sky, and the ground is crumbling beneath your feet, soaked and covered in rotting vegetation. Every step is accompanied by a clicking sound and a murmur in the distance, which does not bode well. The world you've just immersed yourself in is terrifying, damp, vibrant with life, and full of creatures that would strike terror into even the bravest of people today. Vitae in the Carboniferous Period, an era when the planet breathed differently, and when insects ruled with a size and strength that we would consider impossible today. This world was not made up of savannas or snow-capped mountains. It was a green, sultry greenhouse where an unknown threat lurked at every turn. Life exploded here in various and often grotesque forms. Everything was different here, from the chemical composition of the air to the size of the animals that survived in this environment. As we delve deeper into this dark period in Earth's history, we find that this is one of the strangest and most fascinating chapters of life on our planet. During the Carboniferous Period, the planet's atmosphere was radically different from today's. Thanks to the huge amount of photosynthesizing plants that covered almost the entire land, a huge amount of oxygen was released into the air. This excess has led to oxygen concentrations in the atmosphere reaching as high as 35%, more than 1.5 times what we consider safe for human breathing. Such a high level of oxygen today would cause dizziness, difficulty breathing, and even spontaneous ignition of damp wood at the slightest spark. But it was an opportunity for life at that time. In this oxygen paradise, insects thrived like never before. Their bodies were able to grow to enormous proportions because the tracheal respiratory system functioned more efficiently in such a high oxygen environment. Vertebrate fauna developed in the same way, especially amphibians, who began to explore life outside the water. But in this world full of cockroaches and flying predators, it was far from safe to feel. Oxygen may have supported life, but at the same time it was terrifying with its impermanence. The Carboniferous was a time when the world resembled an endless greenhouse. Moisture would cover you like a blanket. Ubiquitous drops of water fell from the ceiling from the leaves of giant ferns and bryophytes. The ground beneath my feet was soft, often completely waterlogged, which made any movement difficult and tricky. The sun, although present, could hardly penetrate the dense vegetation, which created a permanent gloom. This environment was home to gigantic plants whose height exceeded anything we know today. Tree-like club mosses and horsetails reached up to 30 meters. There was a heavy, musty atmosphere in this jungle, in which entire ecosystems were born and disappeared. Dead plants fell into swamps, where they gradually turned into coal, which we mine today. Every inch of this world was alive, constantly changing, pulsating, and dangerous at the same time. This natural laboratory created the conditions for the incredible development of insects and other invertebrates, as well as for the first amphibians and their predecessors. In this stifling environment, a world was born that can only fill modern man with terror and fascination at the same time. In the sky of the world at that time, there were creatures that would still look like scenes from a nightmare today. The largest flying insect of all time, Meganeura, resembled a giant dragonfly, but with a wingspan of over 60 centimeters and a body almost 40 centimeters long. These air beasts were perfect hunters. Their compound eyes gave them an almost complete view of the space around them, and their strong legs with jagged protrusions helped them grasp prey in midair. Meganeura was the terror of everything that moved. It hunted smaller invertebrates and other flying animals, including the giant Paleodictyoptera butterflies. Thanks to its extraordinary aerodynamics and high oxygen levels, it was capable of sharp maneuvers and deadly precision. The air belonged to her. In addition to active hunting, it was able to lurk on branches and take off at the right moment. It was a symbol of an uncompromising predator that other creatures had to avoid if they wanted to survive their lives. On the ground, where the soft terrain made every step difficult, moved a creature that commanded both respect and terror, Pulmonoscorpius kirktonensis, the largest known scorpion in Earth's history. This giant reached a length of almost 70 centimeters, which puts it in a position several times larger than any modern scorpion. Its body was protected by a strong chitin-covered exoskeleton, which provided excellent defense against predators as well as mechanical damage. The front claws were massive, ending in sharp spikes capable of crushing the shells and soft parts of the bodies of other animals. Its curved tail, tipped with a venom thorn, was a deadly weapon. A quick lunge was enough to kill its prey. This scorpion was not a passive creature. It actively hunted in shallow waters and on land, where it lurked for smaller arthropods, mollusks, as well as small amphibians and reptiles. Thanks to its ability to survive both on land and in water, it has become a very successful predator. It had 4 eyes, 2 in the middle for spatial vision, and 2 on the sides for light detection. It is likely that his body carried other sensory organs that helped him detect vibrations and chemical signals. An encounter with this creature would be not only terrifying for humans, but also dangerous. Pulmonoscorpius was the true ruler of the lower strata of the Carboniferous jungle. Among the largest and most conspicuous inhabitants of the Carboniferous land was undoubtedly the Arthropleura, a gigantic millipede whose body could measure over 2.5 meters in length. This invertebrate colossus crawled clumsily on the ground, its body being composed of 30 massive segments, each of which carried a pair of limbs. The width of the individual segments could reach up to 0.5 meter, which made it a real moving fortress. Its strong exoskeleton provided it with perfect protection, and it also shed regularly to allow it to grow, similar to today's insects or crustaceans. Although its appearance may seem scary, it was probably not a predator. Its diet apparently consisted mainly of rotting plants, seeds, and other organic material. There is no fossil evidence of jaws capable of hunting larger prey. However, scientists believe that adults may have occasionally indulged in smaller animals. Still, its giant body was enough of a deterrent. Even predators such as giant scorpions would think twice about attacking a millipede several times its size. Arthropleura remains one of the largest land invertebrates to ever walk the earth. While the sky was dominated by predatory dragonflies, another species of flying insect brought a touch of elegance to the carbon world, Paleodictyoptera. These giant insect creatures with a wingspan of up to 50 centimeters resembled today's butterflies or moths, but were much larger and more structured. Their wings were beautifully veined with shisi mesh, which earned them the nickname ancient wings with mesh. They had 4 wings and often small protrusions near the head, which could be used for stabilization during flight. Although their size may have seemed intimidating, they were harmless herbivores that fed on plant juices. Their proboscis has been adapted to absorb fluids, which makes them one of the oldest known representatives of this style of nutrition. They were abundant in the upper levels of the Carboniferous forests, where they flew among giant leaves and trunks of tree-like plants. Although they were not a threat themselves, they were often targeted by predators, especially gigantic dragonflies, but their presence added a kind of strange harmony between beauty and horror to this ancient world. At the bottom of ancient rivers and wetlands lurked a creature that could confuse even experienced arachnologists, Megarachne. When its fossils were first found, scientists thought it was a giant spider and gave it a name meaning giant spider. Later, however, it turned out that it was a water scorpion, a distant relative of today's spiders and crustaceans. Its body measured almost 60 centimeters and was flat, armored, and adapted to life at the bottom of watercourses. Megarachne used a method known as seving nutrition to feed. Using paddle-like appendages, she raked up soft sediment and hunted for worms, small arthropods, and other small creatures. Occasionally, it was able to hunt small amphibians or reptiles if they came close to its shelter. However, it probably did not carry out active hunting. Much more often, it lurked hidden in burrows or murky water, ready to pounce on careless prey. Although it was not the largest predator of its time, its appearance and hunting methods still make an unsettling impression. Even before Megarachne began lurking in the waters of the carbon marshes, there was another colossus, Hibbertopterus. This giant among aquatic arthropods was huge for its time. It grew to a length of almost 2 meters, which makes it one of the largest sea scorpions in the history of the Earth. His body was wide, flattened, and extremely massive. Unlike agile hunters, however, Hibbertopterus preferred slow movement, using its strong constitution for intimidation and protection rather than quick attacks. Its feeding strategy was similar to that of Megarachne. It used paddle-like appendages to rake through sediment in the so-called sieving method of nutrition. However, due to its size, it could afford to focus on larger prey, smaller fish, amphibians, or insect larvae. Although it may have looked clumsy, its massive build provided not only protection, but also a dominant position among other aquatic creatures. He was the silent swamp ruler, the embodiment of a slow but relentless force that knew no competition in the dark waters of the Carboniferous. If there is one creature that could compete with crocodiles in size, it is undoubtedly Gycolopterus, the largest known arthropod that has ever lived. Its length exceeded 2.5 meters, making it an unmistakable predator of the aquatic environment of the Devonian and Carboniferous periods. It had a long, claw-tipped body that was itself over 40 inches long, thick enough to crush the armor of other invertebrates or grip slippery amphibious prey. Despite its impressive size, it was surprisingly light, as its body was made up of a relatively simple anatomy. This fact allowed it to move surprisingly swiftly through the water, which made it a deadly predator. He grabbed his victims with his claws and then crushed or tore them apart. Gycolopterus was the absolute top of the food chain of the aquatic ecosystem. In its time, it may have been what the shark is today, the king of silent hunting, an inconspicuous but infallible killer. In the presence of this giant predator, no other aquatic creature was assured of survival. In the midst of the general frenzy of size, there were creatures that could easily be overlooked by humans. Yet, they played a significant role in the Carboniferous ecosystem. Trigonotarbides were one of the oldest known terrestrial arachnids, which appeared as early as the Upper Silurian, but experienced their boom during the Carboniferous. Their size ranged from a few millimeters to a maximum of 5 centimeters. They were similar in appearance to today's spiders, but with one major difference: they could not weave webs. Their body was divided into cephalothorax and abdomen, protected by thick plates and covered with chitin. Instead of fishing with a net, they focused on active predation. They firmly grasped prey such as worms or small arthropods with their limbs and then killed it. Some experts believe that they may have had a partially plant-based diet, similar to some of today's mites. Nevertheless, Trigonotarbides show that even in the time of gigantic life forms, small but effective predators found their place, moving almost unseen, but were an integral part of the Carboniferous forest. Although most of the attention in the Carboniferous is focused on giant creatures, representatives of microscopic life such as Lepidocoleus, also known as the Excalibur worm, cannot be overlooked. This tiny organism, barely visible without a microscope, had a body covered in tiny calcite plates that resembled scales or knight's armor. When threatened, he was able to curl into a ball, while the sharp edges of his pads created a defensive barrier almost impenetrable for any attacker. Despite its size, it was a fascinating example of evolutionary specialization. It combined the strength of crystalline armor with the ease of movement, although it also limited the speed and range of movement. His armor protected him perfectly, but prevented him from finding food effectively. It fed on organic waste, which allowed it to survive in the environment of shallow seas and coastal reefs. This armored worm is proof that evolution has been able to create extremes not only in size, but also in the ability to survive in a hostile world. While most of the attention is often focused on insects and arthropods, the Carboniferous was also an era of significant vertebrate evolution. Among the most interesting of them were early amphibians, which often resembled today's crocodiles in size and appearance. These creatures were not only significantly larger than their modern descendants, but also much more diverse. They reached lengths of up to 6 meters and had strong jaws full of sharp teeth. Their strong bodies were partly covered by scales and were able to move both in water and on land. Their reproduction underwent a fundamental change. For the first time ever, amniotic eggs, i.e., eggs capable of surviving on land, appeared. This marked a revolutionary step in the evolution of life on Earth, as it allowed reptiles and their relatives to leave the aquatic environment as a condition for reproduction. These early amphibians became the ancestors of many other groups that later dominated the planet. Although their appearance may have been terrifying, their presence was key to the transition from an aquatic to a completely terrestrial way of life. At the end of the Carboniferous, the Earth began to change dramatically. The continents that had previously existed separately gradually converged and merged into one huge supercontinent, Pangaea. This process has had major impacts on the global climate and the distribution of the environment. The emerging mountain ranges affected the airflow and thus precipitation and temperatures. Gradually, the humidity began to decrease, which meant the retreat of the vast tropical swamps, which were a typical feature of the Carboniferous landscape. This transformation marked a major turning point. With the retreat of the swamps and the reduction of oxygen levels, the era of gigantic insect forms began to end. Plant vegetation began to adapt to new conditions, and terrestrial reptiles came to the fore, better coping with the new, drier climate. This shift opened the door to a new geological era, the Permian, which laid the groundwork for the arrival of the dinosaurs tens of millions of years later. But it was in the Carboniferous that the strangest and most terrifying life forms that planet Earth has ever known were born. At the turn of the Carboniferous and Permian, fascinating shapes and adaptations appeared among early reptiles, which made them a harbinger of future dominance of terrestrial vertebrates. Diplocaulus, an amphibian about a meter long, had an unusual boomerang-like head shape. The protrusions on the sides of the skull probably served for defense and stability when swimming. His body was adapted to life both in water and on land, making him the versatile survivor of this transition age. Diplocaulus was evidence that evolution led to increasingly peculiar body shapes in response to environmental pressure. A complete iconic contrast to Diplocaul was Dimetrodon, a massive predator, often mistaken for a dinosaur. In fact, it was a synapsid, related to future mammals. Dimetrodon could measure up to 5 meters, and its distinctive feature was a giant sail on its back, which it probably used for thermoregulation. The combination of a muscular body, sharp teeth, and adaptation to different environments made it one of the top predators of its time. These animals showed how, after the retreat of gigantic insects, space opened up for a whole new chapter of life on Earth, the one that led to reptiles, mammals, and eventually man. If the Carboniferous was supposed to be the era of gigantic insects, then the Permian that followed brought true terrestrial predators. Among the most terrifying were the gorgonopsids, creatures that looked like a cross between a bear, a dog, and a lizard. Some species reached a size of over 1 ton. Others were smaller, but they all had one thing in common: deadly teeth specialized in different types of food. Their skulls were built to withstand a strong grip, and their teeth were adapted to tear, crush, or chop flesh. Gorgonopsids were synapsids, i.e., relatives of mammals, and show that mammalian development was not always slow and inconspicuous. Some genera, such as Cynognathus or Lycaenops, showed signs of social behavior and possible hunting in groups, a trait now known in canids. Despite their haunting appearance and success, their era came to an end with the advent of massive environmental changes that caused the largest mass extinction in Earth's history. The Carboniferous was exceptional not only because of its fauna, but also as an era of transition between marine and terrestrial life, between invertebrates and vertebrates, between simple structures and complex ecosystems. The cornerstones of modern life were laid right here, in a damp, green, and unsettling world where the Earth itself breathed differently, and where every corner lived, hummed, rustled, and breathed in a completely different rhythm. If you are interested in this fascinating journey into the distant past, like the video, write your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more insights into the wildest eras of Earth's history.